Thanks for listening to Things I've Learned. Today, our guest is Beth Probst. Since 2012, Beth, founder and CEO of At the Core, has inspired college bound families to think strategically about college, major, and career selection to avoid stress and extra expense. Beth's practical tips and stories from the trenches inspire families to be thoughtful, practical, and creative about college related decisions. This topic's very relevant for me and a lot of my peers with college age kids. In general, I think choosing a major and a career is always very interesting, and for many, it's a lifelong process of discovery. But in particular, I would say now, with the cost of college having increased so much, doing this process right is more important than ever. So, deciding on a college major seems like a very personal process, and it's also very hard. I feel like people have so little idea about potential careers and what the day to day work of a potential career would even be. So, Beth, how have you helped people understand this to help them steer their college selection and decision on a major?
Mm. It is such an important decision to make, right? What am I going to do at the end of high school? And you and I both have two kids who are experiencing or have recently experienced this. So we've certainly walked it with our own kids. We've seen it with neighbors and friends and other extended family members. It is tricky. And I'm glad we get to have this conversation and kind of share some of those practical tips. Um, so just to kind of put all of the moving parts out on the table so that everybody really recognizes, because you mentioned several of them, and I want to even add one more. So we talked about college. You mentioned college major, right? So just to define that for anybody listening, you're probably familiar, but just to remind you, it is the thing that your student elects or selects to focus on during those college years. The majority of their classes will take place in that major or in the construct of that major. They'll also take other things, but they may take about 50% of their classes in that major. Second one to put on the table is college selection, right? So that's ultimately the place where we put all the stuff in the car and drive them, and they get themselves tucked into their dorm room and get underway. That is the place where they go to do that, to take those classes and have that college experience. The third one to put on that table is that career that your student will step into once they're done with college. So that career, so we've got college major, we've got the college itself, we've got that ultimate career that they're moving toward. And then wait, there's one more. There's an individual who is that person who will go and take those classes and have that experience and prepare for transitioning to that world of work. So just put all those pieces out on the table, because there's really different kind of components or different thoughts surrounding each of those. Of those four, though, the natural focus for so many families is college selection. And a lot of times, you know this, John, we get caught up in it. All of our peers start visiting colleges at some point during high school. They're making their lists of questions that they're going to ask the college. They focus there. And I think they really pay little attention to the college major, or less attention, and less attention for sure to the career, right? And you know, and I know that those years of college move very quickly. They do need to think about that career sooner than later. So again, natural focus can be on the college itself. And I have a philosophy about that. Is that a dog? I have to
It
ask.
is.
I
It
love that.
is.
That's awesome. So your dog is like, pay some attention to me.
She likes your show.
I like that. Good. So that natural focus on college is, my take on that is that it's because it's tangible. It's the thing that we can touch. We go on a campus, we have an experience, we go to a football game, we eat food, right? We tour a campus and sit. We see a dorm. It's harder to make decisions on the things that feel less tangible. But the bottom line is, I'm going to share. This is probably my favorite tip to share. And that is for families to set aside that natural tendency of focusing on the college and perhaps think a different way. And I want you to remember the four things on the table. Let's start with the individual. if we think first about that individual, what their interests are, what their values are, what their preferences are, what their strengths and struggles are, what their lifestyle goals are, as much as they can articulate that as a 16, 17-year-old student, and they really can, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Think first about who they are and what they are seeking, then start to make the connections into the kinds of jobs that can be a great fit for them. That's the second step, is career thinking and career exploration. Then third is, oh, if I have my eye on these kinds of careers, what type of education, what might I study? What type of education? Where do I go get that education? That's third. And then, well, really, what type? And then fourth is what college meets my criteria, right? Size, distance from home, cost, all those things, that has a great program and track record in that major and helping people move toward the careers that I'm thinking about. So, individual, then potential careers, then what do I study? What kinds of majors? Then the college. That is the greatest aha moment for many of our followers, to just give them that sense of how to do that differently. You did ask as well how we help. So we help by doing lots of things. And when I say we, there's a team of 17 of us based in central Ohio, but we help and serve families thanks to the internet who are all across the country. We do a lot of teaching and imparting information about the bits and bytes, the mechanics of the college process, because it can really create a lot of stress for families, that college application process and all that. So we do teach about the mechanics, but we also do something that's very much one-on-one and geared toward the student directly. It's a process that we call guided self-assessment. It is intended to help that student through a self-assessment process, but they get to do it together with a guide. And so together they're going to talk about and explore through an interview process their interests, their strengths, their struggles, their values, their preferences, their lifestyle goals, all those things I said before. And then we help that student make the connections to the types of careers that can be a great fit for them. So we've been doing that for since 2012, so about 12 years now. Hundreds of students have been through that process, and most families view it as a tremendous gift that they can give their student to really do that thinking with someone. So that's a long answer for a short question, but I wanted to make sure, again, just to recap, to put those four pieces on the table, those four moving parts in the process, and then also just give folks a sense that there are tools and techniques that are out there that are different than the standard, maybe career quiz or interest inventory that a lot of high school students take, and they get back very frustrating results from those kinds of online quizzes. And so what we do is very much the opposite of that. It is very interview based. It's one-on-one. It's extended in time. It's an in-depth process. So hopefully that answers your question. I can tell from looking at your face that you already have 6 more questions. So lay them on me. I'm ready to talk about that.
Yes, I mean, obviously that is all super interesting. I, have totally seen, multiple times lots of people really focused, exactly like you're saying, very, very focused on where they're going. And then that just kind of drowns out all the other such important things of like, what do you actually want to do? And how are you going to be able to pivot to something else as you maybe discover that what you started doing isn't necessarily the thing you want to do most?
What? Are you
Yeah.
saying teenagers change their mind? I have never, not one time, heard of that. Yes,
I
absolutely. Yeah.
actually I actually changed my major a number of times. And I went into college not exactly knowing what I wanted to do. Interestingly enough, I felt like really passionate about a lot of different things. And it was hard to understand, I think probably more than anything, what the career implications of those things were.
Ooh, I have
And so,
so I love that. So when we have multiple passions or multiple things that we find interesting, I think again, sorting through those and right, like kind of holding each one and deciding what kind of validity does this have in the working world? Or is this one really best served by being an avocation or a hobby for me versus a vocation? And then even more interesting, are there multiple things I can pick up that I find interesting? And are they intersected somehow in the working world? And I'll give you some examples as we move through our conversation today. So, just to kind of help people understand that's a good problem to have, what you've described, that multiple interests. There are a lot of students who are kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum who go through their normal coursework in middle school and in high school, and I'm making a face. It's not a happy face. It's I'm just not that interested in any of these things that are in my standard high school curriculum. So what does that kiddo do when it's time to decide what they're going to do after high school? Well, they haven't maybe enjoyed anything that they've had in that high school experience. So how do they make decisions? It's very interesting the way, and one more point about, I don't know exactly how old you are, but when we were in college, I started in 1986 and graduated in 1990. So like forever ago. Fire had been discovered, and the wheel, I think, I'm teasing, sorry, was a long time ago.
Actually, it actually that's I started in '88, so we're about the
Right.
same age. Yep.
But when we went, the cost of college was so tremendously different than today's cost that if we changed our major a few times, if we ended up an extra semester or an extra year in college, it was not going to have the impact that it does for today's student. You know how much college costs. I know exactly how much college costs as well. So I just bring these things up because I think it does cause families to recognize the importance of our kids having what we like to call a rudder in the water as they're leaving high school. We just want them to have some sense and thought related to their direction. And again, I've got lots of tips to share to kind of help people guide their own kids or to find some resources that can help along the way.
And I think, you kind of described that you go through this process then where you do this interview with them. You're then helping them to try to understand what it is they want to do. I'm curious how often you find that. I know when I was 17, like if someone had sat me down and really tried to figure out what it was I wanted to do, they would have a hard time because I know I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do.
Sure.
So I'm curious how much of it is, that you're able to actually go through this interview process and reach that kind of understanding, or is it that you're just kind of kicking off a self-discovery process that's going to be valuable to them over the next couple of years, that they maybe understand and think things that they didn't before?
It's a combination of those two. So it is so just to clarify one thing, it is a set of interviews. So we do 5 one-on-one 1-hour interviews over the course of 2 to 3 weeks with a student. So the reason why we do so many is because if we just did one, a student could do what we call posturing in that first interview. It's not pretending exactly, but it's maybe presenting to us a version of themselves that they would like us to hear. And we need more information than that. We've got to dig below that. And that's why we do those 5 successive 1-hour interviews. We also have the student do homework in between those interviews because we want them to engage with this thinking of self-assessment. So the primary focus during those first interviews is just self-assessment. What can that student articulate about who they are and what makes them tick by investigating and considering their experiences, their aha moments. And sometimes we think we will see a particular nugget that's true about a student, and we may go back in our notes and say, oh, Mary, you talked about this here and you talked about this here and you just wrote about this experience. Do you think those three, are connected? And we want that student to see who they are and make those, oh my gosh, I am totally a risk taker. Or, oh my gosh, I really struggle with wanting to please other people. Um, that type of thing is really, we want them to have those recognitions, because those are little elements that even at 16 will be true later in life. I really enjoy this, or I do best in this situation. We want them to have those nuggets. How we then take that truth about a student, we do all the heavy lifting to help connect that to a list of potential careers. We do not have a magic wand. We cannot come back and say to that student, poof, you should be a fish hatchery manager or something like that. That would be ridiculous. But what we can do is start to put together some career areas for that student, and even some specific named careers that can play to that student's articulated strengths and interests, and help keep them away from the things that they may struggle with. So we're shining a flashlight into that kind of that dark future of work for that student, and helping them see some options. Then we teach them how to engage with active career exploration. We help them with their first informational interview. We teach them the amazing online tools that are out there to start to dig into, what are the other work characteristics about this? What are the job duties of that type of work? What kind of education am I going to need? Am I going to need a graduate degree to do that work? Well, how do I feel about that? Oh, better yet, what kind of money does that job make, and how does that income ability align with what my lifestyle goals are? Will it fit or will it not fit? Right. So we're talking as 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, to do this kind of engagement is so tremendously valuable, and it's great fun. And the bottom line is they want to do it. So this is that we can't force a child to do this. The students that engage with this process do so willingly.
That sounds like such an amazing process. Exactly like you're saying, that long set of interviews, and obviously a great deal of emotional intelligence, I'm sure, on your guys' part to be able to tease out the actual detail. That's
we've
amazing.
we've practiced it for many years, and we know sometimes, when to lean forward and pull on that string, and when to kind of let that student have some quiet space to think about what they've just said. It is fascinating. But again, you're picking it up as well. Could parents do this with their own students? I would argue some could. I think some absolutely could. The tricky part is that when they become teenagers, they start to,
Drift.
I call it the Heisman pose. At some point, they're like, no, anything from you, I don't want to hear. But they'll listen, right, to other people and other outside influences. And so, really using that third party, us coming to the table, we don't have any preconceived notions about, you know, goals and jobs for this child. We're there to just listen and come alongside and assist that student. So it's very fun.
That's amazing. So,
Yeah.
you've kind of touched a little bit, I think, on kind of the money side of things, which obviously, people want to make sure that they're selecting a career where they're going to have the financial opportunities to be able to have the lifestyle that they want or need. But sometimes, what I worry about is that people are going in a certain direction, highly motivated by money, and not understanding that it's a
Just,
long
yeah, yeah, yeah.
long
Oh,
career if it's not something they love. Any feedback for people in general that you're able to, that helps people kind of get around that maybe oversight?
so the phrase that comes to my mind is those golden handcuffs, right? So that's that awful feeling. It's like I've got handcuffs, but they pay me a lot to do this, but I hate it, or it doesn't fit my lifestyle goals. And I think that mismatch is one of many mismatches that teens experience. Another one is certainly hearing things from other people about what jobs are like. Um, Several years ago, it still exists today, not as much, kind of that people in the career counseling world would talk about the CSI effect. All those CSI crime scene investigation type shows that were out there were causing all of these kids to think, I want to do that. I want to, solve crimes in an hour, just like, and, just like he did, or just like she did. And all these CSI people are like rolling their eyes like, that is not what it's really like. So those outside influences, can muddy the water as well. Those preconceived notions, chasing money, other things I think that make it really hard, John, are a student's limitations on truly understanding anything about the real working world. Not only the breadth of types of careers that are out there, but even the literal, what is the day to day like? And instead, I think sometimes they latch on to, well, I saw this, on this TV show, or I heard this is the highest paying, the students that are in this major will make the most money, and money is important to me. I'll add in again that issue that I talked about before, that posturing. That's another issue, right? When kids will say, this is what I want, but they've not really dug beneath that too much. So all those things make it very cloudy and muddy for kids to dig through and figure out what's truly important to them. My keys or tips for that are a lot of honest conversation, open and honest conversation, practicing your parent face where you're not rolling your eyes, or not that I don't think you would probably ever roll your eyes. I might have done that as a parent. Like, are we really going to talk about this again? And you're like, nope, nope. When my child is sharing, what it is they're going to share with me, they put it out on the table and we're going to dig and investigate. And then exposure is another one. To me, it is practically criminal that our kids can get all the way through high school and not have any sense of real world money, real world jobs, what life is like when school is over and your work in your life in the world of work begins, right? No idea of, oh, well, nobody told me we had to pay car insurance, and nobody told, I mean, I'm half kidding, but right, all those adultish things. It is amazing that so much of that is missed, if you will, in the schooling, generally for our students, and that's almost a whole other conversation. What is taught to our children and why is it taught? But the bottom line is it needs to be taught, and it's our responsibility as parents to teach it. And I would suggest that we don't want to wait until the end of high school, that senior year, when all these crazy things are happening, and try to cram in this knowledge. It's much easier to back up on a timeline, back into those middle school years, back into those earlier high school years, and start with that thinking and talking and exposing. Even things like, the take your kid to work day, that kind of thing is never a bad thing. Informational interviews with anybody that has a job that seems kind of interesting to a student, just those moments are critical, on whatever level. Another big one is money. You brought up money at the start of this question. Many families shelter or shield their children from the economic realities of life. And I'm not a big one that thinks that that's a good idea. Those same parents often want their students to be successful and to manage money well and to know how to do that. But how are they going to know how to do that unless we walk shoulder to shoulder with them and show them, oh my gosh, here's what it costs for us to go to the doctor last week. Here's what this grocery bill looks like. And oh, by the way, because I keep all of our data in Quicken or, whatever tool I use, I'm going to show you what our grocery bill looked like, 6 years ago. So you can understand, things go up in cost over time. And on some level, I think showing them what household bills look like beyond that, utilities and car insurance. And then you have to talk on some level, whatever level a family is comfortable with income, saving, that type of thing, because they have to understand, what type of income does it take to be able to live the way that we live, on whatever level that family is comfortable. So just some suggestions that hopefully are helpful to families, or at least get them thinking about how we can do that within our household.
I mean, that makes so much sense, right? It's all the education around the educational type things. Like obviously, math, English, those kinds of things are important. But if they don't understand the context of what they're gonna be doing and how that impacts all the other areas of their life, that would be a really, really big deal.
You
So,
know,
go ahead.
super quick. So the place where it tends to come up the first time, if it hasn't really been addressed or talked about, sometimes it happens with the money and college and conversation. When you go on that college tour, maybe it's the first one, and someone on that tour, some parent asks, well, what is the total cost of attendance, or how much does it cost to go here? And they say, with a totally straight face, $72,000 a year, is our, and that parent we've lost them. They've passed out or sat on the bench or whatever. And they're like, we did not know this, we weren't aware, or, which is, it's an exaggerated example, but sometimes that talk about money happens for the first time when the economic realities of paying for college for kid number one appear on the radar. And I have lots of advice and wisdom for families about how to have that conversation, how to set that budget, how to even reduce that price of college through things like dual enrollment, carrying credits into college with you that you don't have to pay for later. So there's lots of things a family can do, but oftentimes it's the first time that they have these very adultish conversations with their kids. What I don't want to see, what I never want for a parent, is to even put off those conversations until they get into a college, or they get into 4 colleges, and you ultimately get that financial award letter. You know how much it's going to cost to go to those 4 colleges, and all 4 of those colleges are well beyond what that family is capable of paying. That is a really bad time to have that first discussion. And if that's painful, I'm looking at your face, you're like, that would be totally painful. That is a good reason why families can be motivated to have that conversation earlier. No one wants to break their child's heart. There are 2,000 plus 4-year institutions in the US, many of them with different kinds of price tags and different kinds of experiences. Usually with creativity, families can make one of those fit, or 10 of those fit, or 100 of those fit, but you have to go into it with that sense of what the budget is, not waiting until the end and being surprised that they're all too expensive and we cannot afford them as a family. And now I have to break my child's heart. No one wants
Yeah.
that. So
No, that's great advice.
let's not do that. Yeah.
So, one of the things that I remember reading at one point was that, a lot of the careers that our kids are going into college for now don't even exist yet, right? Like what they're going to be doing hasn't even been created. I feel like we're definitely at a major inflection point with AI starting to ramp up, although we're probably still in the very, very early days of that. A lot of things with technology that are going to be impacted. It doesn't almost matter like whether you're in IT or you're completely outside of it. Um, are you seeing like rapidly evolving like career choices that are available to people, and in how maybe new careers are being created that you're telling people about that you weren't maybe talking about 5 years ago?
It's a super interesting question, and I understand where that question comes from. More than anything, more of the chatter is related to jobs that people fear will not exist anymore because of the impact of AI. That's where it's interesting that you ask that question almost as an opportunity, like what stuff is out there that, we're not even thinking about. And again, I just have to share that the greater chatter is on the other end of the spectrum. What's going to be going away? What's going to be impacted so tremendously? That if I go and get this 4-year degree, and that, what are the odds that there's no need for that, 5 years after graduation? And I'm sorry, but no one has that once again with the magic wand. I should just in my retirement go search a for a magic wand. That would be super fun. I mention magic wands a lot. There is no magic wand. No one has one. No one can say exactly, but you can start to see some clues. The one clue. So I hesitate to call out any particular underappreciated jobs that are out there. I would feel like that would almost be like clickbaitish for those, like, go take a look at this, and maybe there's only like three of them in all of America, and I don't want people to like set their sights on that. So people can do plenty of career research, but I will share these thoughts related pretty specifically to technology. Our students have a self-proclaimed comfort level with technology, right? They've all grown up with technology. But I would say that on the whole, it is at a user level of technology comfort. It is not at a maker or a coder level of comfort. And in fact, there are many students who kind of rail against that. They do not want anything to do with how that app got built. They just want to use the app happily and successfully. And so I think that is worth investigating and even challenging. And on some level, um, if there were a way for me to stand on a platform and say, every student in the US should learn to code something and have that requirement for learning to code something, I would take up that banner and go to Washington D.C. and do that march. I feel very strongly that people need to understand how technology works, if for no other reason than for the reason that any career that our children enter will be permeated and impacted tremendously by technology. Any field at all. You can name it: dentistry, fashion, automotive design, nursing, publishing, editing, all of them tremendously. The travel industry, whatever. They're all, so you have to have some sense of comfort with technology beyond that user level and embrace it. The second thing, and I mentioned it earlier, that idea of intersecting, and I'll use intersecting technology with other things, or even intersecting two individual. You talked about having multiple interests when you were in high school. I've got a couple of examples. If somebody's interested in the field of English, they love writing and they love digging into how to articulate something in written form so that it's taken in well. If you intersect that with, as an example, technology, that can yield careers at that intersection, like technical writing, as an example. Good technical writing is hard to find, and yet it is so critical. Another great one, healthcare and data analytics. Right? Maybe I want to help people, and I like that idea of being able to maybe peek around the corner and maybe forecast where a next outbreak might be. I just read today that there is something going on with polio. Oh shoot, where is it? It's in the Gaza Strip. They're having this and that's coming from that intersection of healthcare and data analytics, right? It's popping up on a radar, and think of how critical that is. Another great intersection, and this one's not necessarily technology related, but agriculture. I grew up in Indiana, so a big, ag community, and public relations. Maybe I want to be a lobbyist for the farming industry or for co-ops, and help them get the kinds of things that they need from a legislative standpoint. Who knows? All those. But my point is, sometimes things people think too narrowly, and I want them to widen their thinking, understand the impact of technology, and consider that intersection concept. I hope that helps.
That makes so much sense. And kind of drilling into that a little bit too. We've been talking a little bit, I think, about passion and how people's passion can translate into a really long term career that doesn't feel like work, and that That I think there's obviously a lot of studies that have shown how people's passion for things key into their level of success. Like a lot of times there is a strong correlation between how much you love your job and where you end up with it. But I don't think everybody feels like that starting out and can still be very successful with it over time because honestly, I think passion sometimes comes from things like exposure and gaining acumen in your field, etc. So what would you say to kids who maybe feel nervous that they don't feel like they found their calling, but I think
Oh,
a lot of people are still very successful just by investing over time in their career?
yeah, but a teenager can't grasp that over time very well, right? That whole they would I think a lot of them would like to feel some kind of passion right away. And remember, um, we talked about that kiddo who may go through high school and their natural exposure to 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 years of social studies, 3 years of science, a handful of electives in that limited window of their educational path through high school, they didn't touch on anything that brought them passion. Nothing inside their education brought them passion. Maybe they played a sport or played an instrument, and they're more excited about that than they are anything else. And so sometimes they think, well, am I supposed to just make a job out of that? And these are such um, limited thinking. Their head is down. That can't be good. The other thing about passion that I need to say, we are incredibly resistant to ever using that word with teenagers. And the reason why is because we have seen it time and time again result in what feels like pressure. Like that student has to feel passion. And what do I do if I don't feel that passion? Or a student who feels that passion, then they worry, well, what if I don't feel? There's a theory among teenagers that if they do the thing for a living that they are excited about now, that it will zap all the fun from that thing that they would do in the future. I hear this from a lot of teenagers. So the answer is that we need to take that more practical and realistic view of what work really is, especially what work really is when we're in our early 20s and we are on the bottom rung of that ladder, right? Or of that organization. There will be things about those first jobs that do bring you joy. And there will be things about those first jobs that we call toilet cleaning. They are the crappy parts of that job. And if you recognize early on that every job is going to have some of those good things and some of that toilet cleaning, you have to just recognize that. And that your job over time is to maximize the good things, right? The things that play to your strengths and your interests, and the things that take you away from the things that you don't find interesting and or that you struggle with, right? That's your goal over time. It may be that it's closer to balanced at the start because you might have some more menial tasks that you're doing as you're first getting underway. They may not put you into the most exciting and sexy project on your team when you're 22 or 23 years old. You may get your cut your teeth on those less exciting things. And how does a student come to know that? One of the greatest ways is by having a summer job or a part-time job where those are typically customer service facing or pretty low level task oriented jobs. And again, they are experiencing sometimes quite literally the toilet cleaning. And so they may not like it. Both of my kids worked at our second one worked at, she was a serial worker, so she literally was like revolving door. She'd be like, nope, I'm leaving this part-time job. Nope, I'm going to try the cookie place. Nope, I'm going to do the dry cleaner. Nope, I'm going to be a server. And she did all these things because she was less patient. I think she believed that there could be less toilet cleaning somewhere, so she had to learn that there was toilet cleaning everywhere. Our son stayed at the same employer for a long time, but I think the whole point is that those experiences bring them some of those realities of the working world. And it also exposes them to that money side, right? They get that paycheck. They have to learn about taxes. They learn about working with mixed age coworkers, right? Remember, our teens spend most of their time with their peers while in school and on teams and in other extracurriculars. This gives them that chance to work with somebody who might be from a very different walk of life as they're a bagger at their local grocery store. Those are really, really good things because those are the people that we'll work with when we head out into the working world. So exposure, I think the key though is for students to set aside some of that pressure related to passion or making sure that they have their dream job, or I want to make sure that I'm satisfied and happy. I think it's really good to just set your sights on that first job and to know that all of our jobs and we're going to have twists and turns, ups and downs, curves in our career paths, and that's okay. But as you leave college, having your sights set on that first job can be very freeing to know that it's not necessarily the thing I'll do for the rest of my life, but it is the thing that I'm going to do once I put my college cap and gown on and cross that stage and go do this work. And then again, life will interact and I'll have lots more roles in my life. But that's a lot less pressure to think about that first job than to think about that, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? That's kind of a silly way to think about it because no one really pretty much does the same thing for the rest of their lives. Even someone like a nurse or someone that goes to medical school or law school, they often have career trajectories that move them again further away from maybe the initial thing that they came out of school to do. So hopefully that helps.
No, that totally makes sense. And I've seen it myself. I've seen it with pretty much everybody I know. What happens is we end up changing our careers a lot over time. What you start out doing and what you think you're going to be doing for the rest of your career rarely, I think, actually is. So
Totally, but in that goal of wanting our children, we use a phrase. You used something similar a little bit ago. We want students to move toward work they will love. We want that. I will tell students, I want you to get up every day in your post schooling adult life, and maybe you're on your way to work, and maybe that's walking down the stairs to your kitchen because you work from home, or maybe that's hopping on a bus or a train or getting in the car, however you get there. And I want you to be excited about most of the things that you're going to do that day at work, and I want you to even kind of chuckle sometimes and think, I get to go do this today. This is kind of cool. And they pay me to do this. And this has worked out pretty well. And if you can kind of plant that vision for them, if that's what you want, right? Some parts will be not super fun. Some days will be more fun. And they pay you to do it, right? And I can live the way that I want to live. Painting that vision for them, I think helps them take the steps along the way to move toward that first job post graduation with some reality and some wisdom and some reasonable expectations.
well, this has been a super interesting conversation. I love all the tips and feedback. Gettingatthecore.com is the place to go for someone to reach out to you and get more information, engage with you and your company, right?
Exactly. Yes, they can call. We always take quick questions from families. And remember, self assessment, career exploration, and educational path planning. We do stuff in all three of those areas because they're all kind of tied together. We don't just pick a college or pick a major without thinking about, who we are and what our goals are from a career perspective. They all cyclically work together, and we're always happy to support families in any way that makes sense. Even if there's something that we don't do, but we know someone else that does something that you need, we have a whole network of resources that we're happy to connect families with.
Well, Beth, thanks so much for coming on Things I've Learned.
Thank you very much for having me.
Bye.